Basement.
Out of the basement, taking fresh air, sunshine. Actually, put a sweatshirt on this morning because I thought it was gonna be cooler than this. Sit in the shade, and I'm gonna be warm. I think pretty soon.
Yeah, you're going to be sweating by the end of the 10 o'clock show. You better change before we get to the fun because.
Well, we have a screen and porch, and we do have a ceiling fan. I just gotta put the fan on.
Because they have options in the suburbs. Where's my seat, Amy? Where's my seat?
Oh, sweetie, you can have anyone. I'm on the couch. You got a big table.
Yeah,
so nice.
anyone that's 6 feet away.
There's plenty of space, girl. You come by whenever you want to.
I would just want to be out there golfing and whack you all with golf balls in the porch. So, because that's how bad I am at
You
that.
have to be a really bad golfer to do that. I'm just saying.
That sounds like a challenge. Weather today, as you can tell from Amy's shop, my window, and Felicia's reflection, is sunny. Abundant sunshine here today. What a great weather day we have in store. The humidity's gone. The low pressure of Cristobal making its way into Western Ontario, long out the way, and we are left with just a really great day. And you're going to love the next few days. Let's first get through today's high temperature. I think it'll be right around 81. The dew points are falling, it's comfortable, and we had almost our earliest sunrise. We won't get any earlier than 5:14. We're still getting a few extra seconds a day at this point as we approach the longest day of the year, still 10 days away. But that's as early as the sunrise gets. Let's take a look at the 7-day forecast. Oh my gosh. I mean, I don't like to sometimes use the word perfect because everyone's perfect is different. But come on, 78 and sunny, that's got to be everyone's standard, right?
That's pretty close.
Pretty darn close.
Yeah, so fine, we'll go with perfect. Saturday cools down a little bit. I mean, it's going to be about 10 or 11 degrees below average. But just all of these days are dominated by high pressure, low dew points. We don't see dew points return. Even Tuesday when we get to the mid 80s, it's not that muggy. Even Wednesday, I still see dew points in the 50s. So even though the temperatures rise into next week, we're going to be in good shape. And it looks like really, except for maybe a passing sprinkle, no rain over the next 7 days.
Oh,
That is amazing. Friday might be patio and a beer weather somewhere that's open with a patio.
I think tomorrow I'm going to be on my own patio with a beer during this show. So,
What? Can we start that early?
yeah. Oh, I've done it before. I'll do it again.
You could. It's acceptable. It's all
Yeah.
acceptable here at the Jam.
All
How
right.
does the saying go? You can't do day drinking if you don't start in the morning.
Cool.
I've never heard that saying, but that sounds like one you made up, Amy. But we'll go with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, guys.
Oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah, let's get into some top stories. Weekly unemployment numbers are actually looking a little bit better than what we expected. Some workers are leaving some jobless roles. Unemployment claims total 1.5 million last week compared to 1.6 million the previous week. And continuing claims declined to 20.9 million, 339,000 fewer than a week ago. The total claims number has fallen for 10 straight weeks, but remains extremely high on a historical basis, which is understandable, but you at least want to hear that it's not getting higher.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and they do say that this could be a couple years before it actually starts to get back down to levels we were seeing before.
One caveat, and I know any news like this is good news, but they're having a really hard time managing people that left work for a little bit but are coming back that never really filed for unemployment, that people don't want to claim that they're unemployed when they're furloughed. So there's a lot of fuzziness with the numbers, and it could go both directions. So take everything with a grain of salt, and the markets certainly are not helping today. Already down 800 points to start your day, so not good news on Wall Street.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about going out on patios, which we can do as long as we're socially distanced, but a number of Republican senators, state senators, are pushing Governor Pritzker to reopen a little bit quicker, like 2 weeks quicker than he is recommending. They want to move to phase 4 within the next week. And the governor is saying, hold on, that is exactly against what all the medical professionals are telling us.
Yeah, I understand people's angst and wanting to get back, and there's a lot of businesses that depend on obviously people being there. But seeing the way the state has handled things and with the trajectory of our cases versus other cases, I know 2 weeks seems like a long time, but this is something that will pass. And we do have some ability for restaurants to be able to get some income. I know it's nowhere near where it needs to be, but I appreciate the lag and the slowness of this. I think that when we have all these protests, we don't know where these numbers are going to go. This illness takes time to actually show itself in numbers. So 2 more weeks, these 28 days between phases. I don't know. It seems like the right call to me.
Well, with several states who opened up and had maybe looser restrictions, they are seeing a rise in coronavirus patients. So you can appreciate going a little bit slower. Of course, we are thinking about our businesses. However, what I don't want to see happen is us go back into quarantine. So once we get out, I would pray that it would just be a done process. But I don't want them to, government leaders to release everything and everyone and all the restrictions, and then we got to dial it back again.
Yeah. And, you also got to keep in mind, so summer, we're all outside. It's harder for the virus to infect people because we're not in closed quarters. And come fall, we're likely going to see a rise in cases. So we need to get it down as low as possible. We'll get a lot of testing done while we've got the warmer weather, because things could change exponentially in the months ahead.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. We got some other news talkers we'll do a little bit later on, but why don't we go ahead and move on to our first guest of the show. We talk about, all the effects of pandemic, whether it's businesses or on your personal health. But one group of people I think that everyone is a lot of people have forgotten about is people that have drug addictions or need some help during this time, as we see statistics rising in terms of opioid abuse and overdoses. So joining us now on how we might be able to help or how we can guide people in the right direction is Dr. Thomas Britton, the President and CEO of Gateway Foundation. Dr. Britton, good to see you here this morning.
Good morning. Great to be here. How are you?
Great. Could you give us some statistics on what we know? I imagine that during this pandemic, it might be harder to gather information on opioid abuse and addiction and overdoses. But what statistics do you have during this time?
Sure. The scariest statistic that's come out recently is that our overdose death rates have gone up 35% year over year, and that the EMS response rate, meaning the number of times you're called to go to an overdose, has gone up 76%. So what it really tells us is that the drugs on the street are more dangerous, and that people are more likely to be using lethal doses, which is awfully scary.
So I thought what was interesting is, from what I was reading, a number of the increases in the opioid cases are in the city and some of these Black communities, because hasn't it historically been some of these more suburban areas that we are seeing bigger problems?
So I think that part of what we're seeing is easier to notice and identify overdoses in some of the inner city neighborhoods versus some of the suburban neighborhoods. It's always been spread throughout all communities. But right now, the drug distribution network has been interrupted. So where one might normally go and get them is harder to get, just because of COVID has impacted everything. So I think more deaths are happening in the Black and brown communities than normal.
So what do we need to do to try to reverse these numbers?
Sure. I think that the hardest thing is, as long as there's stay-in-place orders, that people have a hard time accessing care. And so one thing loved ones can do, for example, is if they see the family member struggling to call for help. Gateway Foundation, for example, we're doing virtual video assessments so that anybody who wants help can call us and talk to us, just like I'm talking to you right now.
I imagine that this is obviously, a lot of it is tied to mental health and the stresses that I've come across with this, with the pandemic. I imagine that's playing a part in this too.
I think it's true. I think addiction, just by nature, is a disease of isolation. And when we are in our own heads and there's not a lot of support outside of us, it's much harder. I think for all of us, frankly, if you look at anybody, whether they have a substance use issue or not, this has been a hard time. And so I think for those that have likelihood to relapse or likelihood to use drugs, that it's just a bad mixture.
Yeah, are you guys seeing a lot more, or getting, at least having connections with people who are worried that they're going to have like alcohol abuse disorders, or, that they didn't have any in the past?
What we're seeing, it's interesting because virtual cocktail hours and things like that have become something that is common. You see it on radio shows, for example. It's a way that people are connecting. And so I don't think folks are as aware of the problems that they're developing. I think this is going to be a tale, that's going to come later down the road. Is some people will leave this pandemic and leave the stay home orders, and they'll leave whatever using they started behind them. But others will have flipped a switch that creates problems for them over the long term.
You mentioned virtual cocktail hours. Are there virtual sessions you guys are doing with people that get treatment? And are there ways for people to talk to someone during this time?
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important things for people to understand is, in the beginning of the pandemic, our call volume went down, for example. There's many days we have 500-600 people calling us saying, I need help. And I think people are scared to reach out for help. We virtualized all of our outpatient services in the second week of March so that, like any Zoom call, you're able to sit in a room virtually with 10 or 12 other people and talk about your problems. And the 12-step community has done the same thing. I don't mind sharing that I'm in recovery, and 12-step work has been something that's helped me stay in recovery. And there are literally meetings 24 hours a day from all over the world that people can access.
And when we're looking at these numbers, I want to know how the at-risk community can be at least a little bit more aware of what's going on, because we have some additional stressors. Like maybe you weren't in that group, and maybe you weren't in that group before, but now that we have job loss, now that we have the unknown of the pandemic, now that we have some of the stress from the protests and riots, how can we identify better whether or not you're in that at-risk community?
Sure. I think if you love somebody who has a problem with substance use or a history of substance use, you really know what to kind of look for. And the biggest thing to look for is that they're changing their behavior or their patterns. So maybe they're not reaching out and talking as much. Maybe they physically look like they're not doing well. They're not doing the activities that they would normally do. These are the red flags, frankly, to be looking for. And oftentimes people feel uncomfortable and they don't want to ask an awkward question, and they don't want to hurt your feelings or be scared about that. And if you think about the 35% increase in deaths, there's been 335 deaths that we know about just in Cook County since January. The stakes are so high that I'd be totally comfortable hurting somebody's feelings by asking them.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because so many of us were sheltering in place and not seeing people. So you can see someone you haven't seen in like a week or so and do a Zoom with them, and maybe they look tired. It could have been a myriad of problems. So you might be afraid to ask what actually is going on.
Hey. What's interesting about the 12-step community and the recovery community is people feel pretty comfortable telling everything and talking to each other. But I think that the other communities, maybe that's not as normal. And some families, there's kind of rules about what you talk about and don't talk about. And I think one of the hardest things is you can't eyeball somebody. I can't sit across from you. I remember like when I was a kid and I'd come home late, and my mom would smell my breath, like, have you been smoking and things like that. It's kind of the same thing that's harder, But I just would encourage people that if you're worried about somebody, call somebody like Gateway, call somebody for help. You don't need to be an expert, but right now it's not a time where we can worry about asking the wrong question.
Yeah, Dr. Britton, we really appreciate that. Let's get Gateway's information up there if people are wondering the same thing and how to reach you guys. Gateway Foundation, Recover Gateway, gatewayfoundation.org. You want to give the number if you have it on hand, Dr. Britton?
So I'm going to be in big trouble with my people because I don't have that number.
No, just Google it. I put you on the spot. That was my fault. Okay. Now we'll reach out online or find the number there. Thank you, Dr. Britton.
Thanks so much for having me. Take care.
Thank you, doctor.
I was going to say, don't worry about the number as long as you got all that med school knowledge up here.
Some other top stories we are talking about this morning. Black Lives Matter protesters, you guys may have seen, tore down a Confederate statue at the Virginia Capitol. We're seeing this happening more and more all over the U.S., where they are not tolerating the Confederate symbols of any kind across the U.S. right now. It was a statue of Jefferson Davis, former president of the Confederacy, removed by protesters and damaged, as you can see, and then taken away in a tow truck a short time later.
Yeah. I'm happy to see this, actually. I'm happy to see this because I think that we need to understand how the perils of slavery still affect us today. And we need to acknowledge that and respect that and understand it a little bit better. I think that, taking down those monuments like that definitely raises that awareness and helps bring some of that understanding that it's inappropriate. It shouldn't be there.
A lot of the criticism is that we're trying to erase history when we do something like that. I think there's something different than a monument and a museum. You can put something in a place where there's going to be a conversation and an understanding versus something in front of a building meant to have people look at and admire. Everything needs to be presented in context. So I don't think this is erasing history. I think this is putting maybe some things in places where a conversation can be had and we can learn something from our past, because that is important.
I know there's been a push to rename some of the military bases that are named after Confederate leaders. And the president has said, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that one's interesting. I mean, because there are leaders that were, they were traitors to the United States. They killed Union soldiers, which is now the U.S. Army, and we have these bases named after them. But yes, a lot of good things have happened on these bases. The president said training people for 2 world wars, and we've defeated fascism a couple times. Yeah, I get it, but they're names, and names mean something, and language means something. And so I would be in favor with changing some of those names. Why not?
Right.
I just want it to be treated with the same sensitivity as the Holocaust, something that was extremely horrible. But, I don't see any Adolf Hitler statues because it's a very sensitive topic that is respected by so many. It's a boundary that isn't crossed. I think slavery needs to be treated the same way.
Well, and you also, you bring up, the Holocaust, and NASCAR yesterday officially announcing that they will not have the Confederate flag allowed to be displayed on NASCAR property or at events that are happening on the property. And I was, watching on Twitter as some people were really upset. But one argument is, we can remember what happened with the South and with the, defection and the secession from the Union. You don't need a Nazi flag to remember that
Right.
Nazis existed, right? Like you can still have that conversation without having that actual flag. Germans have no problem remembering what their history is without the displaying the swastika. So you're right, Felicia. There are some commonalities in those two arguments.
Symbolism matters.
Yes,
Symbolism definitely matters. That's for sure.
for sure.
Let's switch gears a little bit to talk about Mayor Lori Lightfoot. A little bit of a feud between Lightfoot and members of the city council. Not uncommon that happens, right? But one specifically is an alderman who released a clip of an audio call between 50 of the aldermen where things between the mayor and himself got a little bit heated. And she's very frustrated that this call got leaked. Take a listen.
What I'll say is this. These are tough and difficult times, and we ought to be able to have candid conversations. There were a lot of incredible emotions that were shared on that call by fellow aldermen, now all of whom don't feel secure or safe coming together with their colleagues because of one individual who decided to illegally tape a conversation that was intended to be a private conversation among all of us. Shame on him. Shame on him.
Well,
Yeah, and the snippet of the audio that got released, it was heated and some bad language. Yeah, I mean, they're adults, so I didn't really care about the language, but you could tell there were definitely emotions were running high.
To say the least. And she doesn't say him by name, but most people have, they know that the voice on the other end was 15th Ward Alderman Raymond Lopez. And they have had a contentious relationship. That is nothing new. The argument, it was really, I was like, I got to get some tea. I got to sip some here because this is something. I mean, they ended with an FU. And there's a lot of people that say that was inappropriate of anyone to use that language towards the mayor. I will say the mayor made that exact same sort of remark towards the president at one point. But I thought it was an interesting, peel behind the layer, to see how things actually work. I appreciated the candidness on both sides. They're heated in with their discussion. They're trying to support what they think is right. And so it got a little dirty with the language. That happened.
Yeah,
I don't agree with releasing that call because I agree with the mayor. These aldermen, and she was it was a call so that they could divulge more COVID information to the aldermen so they could talk to their constituents. And so it got heated, and it was a call that was not a meeting. So the fact that it was recorded, I mean, that is actually a legal violation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also, go ahead, Felicia.
I don't have a problem with the language necessarily that was used. The positive side of it is the fact that they are having some of these tough conversations behind the scenes to hopefully move our city forward. I think it's unfortunate that it got released. I'm wondering if there will be any consequences for that.
Well, my wonder is if you're going to release a call like that, and we don't have confirmation that it was Raymond Lopez himself that released the call, but if a call gets released, it almost seems like you were then performing for something that would be released in the future. Like you were grandstanding to make a point, whereas the mayor was speaking very candidly to the alderman in the city and wasn't for public distribution. It makes me question the motives behind the words of someone that may or someone close to them may have released that tape.
Do you guys, I don't remember any of this happening with the last two mayors. I don't remember hearing
I can't imagine someone releasing a tape of Mayor Daley's, but I guarantee there were tough conversations.
I mean, Daley had dropped a couple in press conferences back in the day too, where we were like, okay.
Yeah. So what has changed now? I know there are, of course, a lot of new aldermen. Obviously, we have a new mayor, but what is the difference?
The machine is
People are under
broken.
a lot of pressure.
Yeah, and I think the machine has broken down somewhat. Some would argue a little bit differently, but don't forget Mayor Daley passed 24 straight, 50-0 votes for his budget. Those don't come without a few FUs.
True.
I think that's all.
You think? Yeah.
Yes. Let's bring in Deanna Gutierrez. She worked on a really interesting story about, we talk about murals all the time and how some are, allowed in the community, some are not, but they were murals of hope and love. And fortunately, they didn't stay up for very long. Deanna?
Hey everyone, good morning. Yeah, so let's start off with this. On Saturday, a group of Black and Brown Chicago artists came together to paint a mural representing unity in Pilsen. And there you can see it here, but unfortunately it didn't even last a day before it was tampered with. As you can see, it was all painted white. Now there's a social media push right now to find out who's responsible to kind of mess with the mural that just represents Black and Brown communities, right? But before we get into that, I followed an artist. I followed all his murals around the city to see what exactly this type of artwork means to the community.
He's doing it out of his free will, his own time. I mean, he has a full-time job too. So I met him today, and awesome guy, like.
Esther Gonzalez, whose family owns Rosno Gaisi Boutique and Beauty Salon on North Avenue, is talking about Chicago artist Milton Coronado. This weekend, Coronado set time aside to paint murals on boarded up storefronts.
Just provide something from the heart to just bring back some life, some hope to their lives and to their business and to their community.
It started off as a post on social media, asking friends to pitch small business owners who needed a little pick-me-up after the looting.
And even though it's not their home where they actually sleep, take showers, eat in, it is still their own and it's their livelihood. So there's a sense of vandalism, a sense of their life that's stripped away.
Although a lot of damage was seen in Chicago's downtown area, the looting ended up damaging mom and pop shops in Black and Brown communities.
I mean, the whole area on Sunday was a war zone in North Avenue. We just had a feeling they were going to come down this block. We were still hoping they wouldn't, and my mom was praying that they wouldn't.
Gonzalez says the salon suffered about $50,000 in damages, and the interior is almost unrecognizable.
There was cars pulled up here, and they were just grabbing the stuff and putting it all in there, putting it like if it was a drive-by store or something.
While we can't change what has happened, Coronado says we can change how we react to it and start the process of rebuilding.
The looters are not going to beat us, and it's a message that I want to give out through these pieces of art. Simple as it may be, with a basic message, but it just says we're not giving up.
We're going to get through this. I truly believe the human race, there's more good than bad.
Sorry guys, my dog is barking. Someone's walking down the street. But Gonzalez tells me that of course she had the option of just closing up shop, but that store, that beauty salon is so deeply rooted in her family that just wasn't an option for her. Of course, they're going to take a look at insurance and how much that's going to cover, because at the end of the day, this is theft. You know what I mean? This has nothing to do with the protesters, but this is theft.
I appreciate highlighting someone who's trying to do something beautiful for our community. We need that at this time.
And some of the murals are so incredibly gorgeous. I know others have been painted over in the past that weren't expected. Some are sanctioned and allowed. I wonder if there's a better process that artists in the city can communicate so that we can stop having these things painted over when they shouldn't have been.
Well, and in the Rochester Park neighborhood, they actually have a mural log, so that they're all cataloged by the artist and it's approved by the community.
Yeah, and they have that here as well. Well, here, I mean, Pilsen, because Milton was telling me, he's like, I have a wall specifically, not dedicated, but that I can paint on and I can do whatever I want. So when I want to change the artwork or want to make it fit to what's going on in society, I can do that. That's why he was able to do the Marlene Ochoa mural on 16th. But everyone is just so confused as to why someone would just paint it white, like paint it over, cover it. I mean, like this is Chicago, right? We are known for the diversity. We're known for the amount of people that we have here that care about the community. And then to just see it, destroyed in a matter of the night is just crazy.
You would have liked to at least see it stay a week.
Yeah, right.
For sure. Thanks, Deanna.
Thanks, Deanna.
All right, we got a packed show coming up at 10 o'clock. I'm really excited to chat with Bridger Weiniger. He is a podcaster of the podcast I Said No Gifts. And I listened to about 4 episodes yesterday. I can't wait to chat with him.
Yeah, also a North Suburban restaurant and inn that it really stepped up its social media game during the quarantine. Some of the video is pretty funny. We're going to show it to you.
And we're going to check in with friend of the show, Kelly Rizzo of Eat Travel Rock, and she's going to give us some definitely very tasty and worthy options that we could be spending our time at. We got to be outside of the patios, guys.
We'll see you at 10.